I would like to call to order this June 12th, 2017 regular school board meeting of the Columbus Municipal School District. At this time, we do have a quorum. At this time, we'll also ask Mr. Sparks if he would ask our invocation followed by the pledge.
Let us bow. Dear Heavenly Father, we come now, first of all, Lord God, thanking you for another day. Father God, we pray now that as we go into this meeting that we discuss and reach decisions that are pleasing to your sight. We pray that you would just continue to bless this district as a whole. These and many other blessings we do ask in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Now please rise with me. Attention, salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to thank everyone for being here this morning. Board, as we go into our next item of the agenda, I know Dr. Hickman has a couple of items that we need to amend on the agenda before we consider it. Dr. Hickman?
Yes, sir, Mr. President and Board. Under the personnel agenda, Mr. Hunley, would you like to add the two, because I don't know the specific name, but there's an employee on there that we have for termination because they didn't turn in their contract in time, but they did state that they had turned in a resignation letter, but it just never made it to Mr. Hunley. But they do have a resignation letter, so instead of termination, we need to, I'm going to add the put on, what is the name of the individual? Oh, you have the new? Okay. And Mr. Hunley will have the revised for this person to be, to resign. And the ramifications of that is he or she is not asking to be let out of their contract, that they didn't sign their contract. And we have that clause in there that if you don't sign it within a certain time, we terminate you. The other one is a teacher hire from SEL, a special education hire that I would like to put on there to recommend a hire so that we make sure that we get this person a contract before they go somewhere else. And last is the rehab work item. We asked that be removed from our agenda because our insurance company is still putting in the exact language for it to be okay and approve the rehab works.
Okay, and so that's item 5C under the consent agenda, which is consideration to approve athletic training agreement between us and Dreyer.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Board, did you hear the recommended changes to today's agenda? It is under item 5, which is consent agenda, item C. Yes.
And I said rehab works, I'm sorry, formerly rehab works.
And then if we go over to item 8, which is Office of the Superintendent, under B, Section B, Superintendent Recommendations, and go down to 5, the two items he listed for personnel. One you'd ask about a So number 12 is being eliminated from resignations?
Oh, no, sir. Mr. President, number 12 is under resignation. I'm sorry.
Okay, so it's
Number
being
12.
moved from termination,
Yes,
and we've eliminated that off of what we've been reviewing,
That's
and
correct.
actually locating it as number 12 under the
Under
revised resignation.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Board, did you understand the change there? If you look on what was just handed to us and go under resignations, you'll see number 12. That was actually listed as a separate item as termination, but now that part of it's no longer listed. It was on our old. It's not on this new one we were handed. And so that individual is now listed under resignations. It's just that it's not broken out as its own separate entry under as a termination entry. And then the recommendation, if you look at, I would assume that would be number 30.
13.
13. Okay. Number 13 is the one that has been added since our
Yes, sir.
review. Okay. So, Board, is everyone clear on the changes to the personnel, staff personnel items, the additions, the changes to it? Is everyone okay with it or have any questions about it? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hickman.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Board, with the recommended changes to the agenda, do I have a motion to approve today's agenda with the changes requested?
So moved.
It's been motioned by Mr. Sparks. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Dr. Shoemake. Any discussion?
I have discussion.
Yes, Ms. Burdell.
I'm going to have to leave early, so when I leave, I just want the board to be aware that I do have to leave early.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Board, any other questions about today's agenda? Being none, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now, Board, we move to our next item, which is item number 4, school board minutes and information. The first we have is the consideration to approve minutes under A, which is 1, May the 3rd, 2017, 2, May the 8th, 2017, 3, May the 22nd, 2017, and 4, May the 24th, 2017 special meeting. Can we take all these together at one? Okay. I need a motion for approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Has been moved by Ms. Fisher. Do I have a second? I'll make the second. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we move to our item of trustees' travel and discussion. Board, are there any topics that you'd like to talk about regarding your recent travel since our last meeting?
Yes, I went
Yes,
down
Dr.
to Raymond, Mississippi, to the Eagle Ridge Conference Center for the new board member day-and-a-half training. I found it very useful to go back a year later because what happened the first time is just so much coming at you. You can pick up some of it or a lot of it, but you don't understand how it really works until you've gone through a whole cycle. They recommend if people want to go down again, it's perfectly fine. The course is free, so we don't have to pay for it. It would just be the overnight lodging and the mileage. But if anyone has time, I really do recommend going back again. I may go back next year, just because you do pick up a lot of new stuff, and you can ask more intelligent questions.
Thank you for that. And I think that's something, if we could look at the dates. Ms. Woodard, if you would, I don't know, do they offer it monthly, or is it just certain times a year?
Oh, sorry, they offer it 3 times a year. I think it's January, March, and June.
Okay.
And the January meeting is usually, according to them, pretty full, maybe around 60 new board members. March is about 40, and then we have only had 20, which makes it a lot easier, to spend more time on things.
Sure. And then one thing, if Ms. Woodard, if you might do, I know you're a maestro when it comes to communication, especially on the applications through Apple. So if you could look those dates up, even if it is over into next year, and just put those on our, communicate them to us, so that if any board member might want to attend, that we could look to do that. And thank you very much, Dr. Shoemake, for reporting back. Do you have any other comments on it? Or does anyone else have any travel? Yes, Ms. Burdell?
I was just going to recommend maybe we just ask MSBA to cover the topics during our retreat like we typically have done in the past, and ask them for credit, our continuing education credit as well.
That's a great idea, and that's something that certainly when we come up to the dates here, we'll make some notes as to what topics we might want to go over, and when we nail down our date for our board retreat. Now, if we go to our next item, which is the board retreat work session facilitated by MSBA. At our review meeting, we talked about trying to find some dates either kind of in later July or 1st of August. Board, I was thinking somewhere around maybe August the 5th, but what's everyone else's pleasure?
I'm clear on the 5th for what that's worth.
You're okay with that? Okay. Okay. All right. The 12th I know is out for me. I'll actually be traveling that weekend. The 29th, I mean the weekend before, is that when everyone could be available?
It's 26.
Or we could try to do it on a weekday. I mean, just try to. How many is on the 5th?
26.
The 26th?
Yeah, you said 29. Are we talking about August?
Oh, no, I was talking about July. I'm sorry, I skipped back a week. But August the 29th, let's see when that is. No, August the 26th.
August would be a better month. The latter part of August would be better for me.
What about the 19th?
That's fine.
19th? All right, so we want to do August the 19th. Okay, so I will finalize that up with MSBA. So let's see. And board, do we want to have it here at our conference room just down the hallway? Will that be okay with everyone? Okay. All right. And as far as starting time, do we want to start at 8 a.m., 8:30? What's the pleasure? 8 o'clock? Okay. All right. And as soon as I finalize everything with MSBA, as far as time and everything, I'll have Ms. Belma email all those details out to everyone so that we can get it all down and be prepared. And plus, I will also just kind of see what they're thinking as far as what we should cover, but then also what you had mentioned, just kind of see if they could spotlight and go through a lot of that information. And then we could also work to see what other topics we may want to address that's very specific to our district and not just a broad, kind of catch-all category of things. So we'll do that. So August the 19th at 8 a.m. here at Brandon Central Office. All right, board, thank you for that. Now we move to our next item, which is item D, discussion and consideration of authorization of Stevens Group to provide GeoBond analysis information and refunding options to CMSD debt. One thing, just to kind of, on the discussion part of this, is that in Mississippi, to understand, is that you have a financial advisor, you have an underwriter, and then you also have what's called an underwriting syndicate. Now, in the bond world, what that simply means is that your underwriter are the people who are really tasked with, getting all of the numbers together, getting interest for your issue that you might have, as to who would buy your debt upon a refunding option. And then the underwriting syndicate is individuals that they bring in to help market that, as well as best efforts a lot of times to make sure that your debt is placed. With the one that's considered, if you've read through, you can see is our 2009 GO bond issues. Currently, just because I follow this in my day-to-day work, in Mississippi, I believe you have to have at least a 3% savings. Ours is north of 4% right now on that particular issue, which would equate over the life of that particular bond of just almost $300,000 in savings if we were to be able to move forward with it. Now, I talked with Jim Young. I called him last week when I was sending information to you, spoke to him this morning. He said he had no issue with the group, that, if we did go through with this, that he would still serve as our financial advisor, just because that's what his role in this overall process would be to begin with, because he is not an underwriter, that he is a financial advisor, and that he has noticed that we've gotten close throughout this year, and it's a compression in well, let me use English here. A drop in interest rates have made our bonds that much more valuable, put us in the money, which simply means that we would be able to do a refunding option, which would net us savings. And so interest rates, just like if you look at the stock pages, you see they go up and down like markets do, so do interest rates every day. And so this would at least, since this has been for well over a year or more, the Achilles heel for the district would put us on the path of progress of making some headway in that respect. And of course, it'll be up to, if we do go through with this and get the information, what I plan to do is, after, if y'all do give approval, then communicate back so that, and talking to Mr. Dunn, communicate this back to them so they can release the information to us, to which I'll have Ms. Belma upload it to resources for everyone to see all the analysis that'll show not all just the numbers, but also the net savings and how we can go about it. And then, of course, have Mr. Young be able to come, even if we needed to look to call a special meeting, because as I mentioned, they move daily, to where we could actually see how we might be able to do ahead, especially going in this budget year, because $30,000 a year or more is, in the budget times we're in, is pretty significant. So, but that is kind of the discussion that I've had with Mr. Young, and of course, I haven't had any in-depth discussions with the Stevens Group, other than the fact is that they could provide that information to us in the underwriter capacity. And so that's why after talking to Mr. Dunn, I wanted to bring this to you in full disclosure so that we could talk about it and, of course, be able to see what we wanted to do to be able to seize opportunities that are before us. So, Board, do you have any questions or discussion about this item D? Yes, Ms.
I
Burdell.
do. I looked over the contract, and so there are a lot of moving parts in that contract, and I don't see our legal counsel here this morning to be able to explain and answer some of those questions for me. I also would rather have the advising from our bond attorney that I know you said you've spoken with, because this is a bond issue, and he specializes in those types of things.
Right.
So for me, I just need a little bit more clarification. I think in the past we've kind of tabled some things, especially for financial reasons, because we wanted to make sure that we were well informed. So that would be my concern, and that would be what I hope the board would consider.
Okay. All right. Now, just understand is that I understand what you're doing, as far as, I made sure that I got all this information out. We went through it. We are not committing the district to do anything. All this is doing is so we can get the information. So we're not signing on to go through with it. And when I talked to Mr. Young this morning, he was okay with it. And he said that, he would be able to come up here as we wanted him to do, which is why I mentioned I could call a special meeting. But we can't get any of the information so that we can review it to even be able to go over it with Mr. Young until this G17 is returned. And that's not something that I'm trying to do. That's just municipal issue law. So,
But there's a clause in that contract, and I don't remember where it is, and it talked about the commitment or committing to this group for these services. And so we've had no discussion about it. And
Right.
any legal contract that we have come before us, we always make sure that we get the advice from our
Sure.
legal counsel. And we just got this on Friday afternoon. So that would be my concern. I don't know if the rest of the board has a concern about it, but I do know last year when we hit the budget cycle, there were a lot of questions, and there were a lot of people who were uneasy about some of the decisions that were being made and the information that was being transferred to the board, and they didn't have good understanding. So my motion for this item number D would be that we table this item until we can have this contract reviewed by our attorney, our legal counsel.
yes, I don't know why he's not here. That's my question.
But that's my motion.
I got his voicemail. I don't know why he's not here, but he has reviewed it, and that's why he said we could place it on the agenda. I called Mr. Dunn.
Question.
Yes.
The G17,
Mhm.
is it only available through Stevens Group? And is the savings of possibly 4% only available through Stevens Group? Or can we currently get that through our current fund resources?
Okay. The savings is dictated by the market and the interest rate, so it's not captive to just the Stevens Group. It's based upon the market and how interest rates fluctuate up and down as to how much savings that we could net on a refunding option. Stevens Group is just a municipal type of underwriter. They do serve as financial advisor capacity, but in Mississippi there are certain regulations. We would not, really burn a bridge with Jim Young just because, they have the information. So all the G17 does is more of a legal type of thing. It's not committing us as a district to use them. It's just committing us to they have to have that in place before they will release the information, because that is because that particular has to be approved before they can release that information to us. It is something, just like me as a financial advisor, I can't start trading on a client's account, even if they have an established account, unless I have them sign off and give me that authority to do it. And so all it simply is that this would permit them to have all their legal documents in place for them to release the data. Because if they just gave it to us, then they would be in violation.
But my question is, isn't that an opportunity that's currently affordable through our resource attorney right now for our bonds, for our GO fund? And this is regarding the GO fund.
Well, yes, but the whole thing is that, we've been talking about this for some time, and, I'm not, faulting Mr. Young in any way, because I think he's doing what, he's doing the best he can. But, I mean, the bottom line is that we've talked about this for over a year. He's been over our long-term debt committee, and yet, I've been researching this because I can track it in my own line of business and see that the savings are north of that. And so that's why I've been making certain that I followed it to see and talk to him to see what we need to do. And his capacity as a financial advisor doesn't do what Stevens does. I mean, there are other underwriters out there that we could engage. Yes, I agree. But, I mean, I don't understand, why. My thing is, I don't understand why, if we're just getting the information, we're not engaging someone to actually do it, because by the time that we review the information and we get another meeting, it may be back below that 3% threshold.
All right, I just want to understand, if we give a request or directive to Mr. Young, who represents us in this matter, are you saying that he may not get it done in a timely fashion, or his staff would not get it done in a timely fashion?
I mean, I can't answer for Mr. Young. I don't know what his resources are and what they're limited to. I mean, I just know that, we have had in-depth discussion. He presented to this board back in March. And, I mean, he knows this is something that is a very difficulty for this district. And yet, we're north of not just 3%, but 4%. And, like I said, it's just like anything in watching your children. It's your responsibility to watch your children, no one else's. And so that's why I've taken it upon myself to follow things. And when I saw this, I'm not blaming one person why they didn't do it or they did do it. All I'm saying is that we realize it now that we have this opportunity. And so we can engage him in his services of being a financial advisor to us. And this information helps not just me explain it to you, but you as a board have complete information to see how these variables work for us in our district, and whether we engage Stevens as the underwriter or some other at the time we go through with Mr. Young in his meeting, that would be a decision at that meeting. All this is doing is giving us permission to get the information. That's what the G17 does. So Ms. Verdell has her motion on the table to table this to a later meeting. Does she have a second?
Second. And then discussion.
Yes.
So you made mention that that Mr. Young was here in March, and he presented to the board, and he did share with us at that time that there was no value in trying to refinance any of our debt because it had just been done 2 years prior, and that there would be no significant gains. And so I don't think that the market has shifted significantly, that we could see a whole lot of gain. So there are a lot of moving parts, and I do think that this would warrant some true discussion.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second, and we've had our discussion. All in favor of tabling this, please signify with your right hand. All opposed? Let the record show that Ms. Verdell and Ms. Fisher were in favor of tabling. In opposition was Mr. Sparks, Ms. Shoemake, and Mr. Spears. The motion does fail. Board, do I have a motion for approval of item D?
So moved.
Has been moved by Mr. Sparks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Has been seconded by Dr. Shoemake. Discussion. All in favor, please signify with your right hand. All opposed? Let the record reflect Mr. Sparks, Dr. Shoemake, and Mr. Spears in favor of the motion. Ms. Fisher and Ms. Verdell in opposition. The motion does carry. Now we move to item E, which is consideration to approve resolution between Columbus Municipal School District and Innovate Mississippi. Now, Innovate Mississippi is Mr. what's his name that was here just the other day? Mike Forrester, that presented to this board regarding the coding information. And so board, with us reading through this information, I think Dr. Hickman had also submitted to us information regarding some other details, support for this particular idea. So board, do I have a motion to approve the resolution being presented to us that we asked our board attorney to present to us?
So moved.
Has been moved by Ms. Fisher. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Sparks. Board, is there any discussion regarding the resolution? Being no discussion, all in favor of support, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now, board, we move to item 5, which is the consent agenda. The consent agenda, we have dates to remember, which is going to be June the 22nd, 2017, which is our public budget hearing here at Brandon Central Services Center at 5:30 p.m. And just to clarify, I think you've been running the advertisement and everything as we talked about, so that has been being published as we speak this month. Then we go to our item B, which is consideration to approve student transfers, consideration to approve training agreement, which is item C that we have taken off. So just know that item C is not in this listed here still. Then we have item D, which is consideration to approve Title I 103A application amount, and this is the information to support, as Ms. Billy Smith had presented to the board the other day, regarding us being a focus school at the middle school. Is that correct, Dr. Hickman? And so that application and supporting information. Then we go to accept donation from Willie Bird and Whirly Bird for the Columbus High School Beta Club. Then we also have consideration to accept cash donation from Kinley Corridor. I hope I got that right. I apologize if I didn't. From the Columbus Air Force Base Spouses Club to the Columbus High School Junior ROTC. And then we go to donation for Columbus Municipal Elementary Schools to Columbus Municipal or Columbus Middle Schools by My Book of Lowndes County, and I think that was added after our meeting. So that is a new item under the consent agenda. And then we have field trips of out of state for the high school girls basketball team to Alabama A&M, out of state to the University of Alabama for the Columbus High School football team, and consideration to approve extracurricular activity prices for school year 2017-18. So, board, with all the items on the consent agenda, I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Has been moved by Ms. Friedel. Do I have a second?
Second.
Has been seconded by Mr. Sparks. Any discussion?
Yes. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
Ms. Fisher.
You said that there was a change, I think, to item C.
Yes.
Or what item has changed on that consent agenda, because I don't see it.
Sure. Item C is we dropped it off the consideration to approve the athletic training because I think Dr. Hickman said the insurance was still waiting some answers on the contract from the Dreyer. It used to be formerly Rehab at Work. So when we approved the agenda, we dropped that off the consent agenda. And then the second
No, we
addition,
just currently did at the beginning of our meeting.
at the beginning of this meeting, that's correct. And then before the meeting started, I think it's Dr. Hickman had asked that we add My Book donation to the middle school as well as the elementary schools. That's a new addition since our review meeting. So those are the only two changes. One was dropped off, and I think we even talked about dropping off the training type of contract for review, but we left it on at the last meeting.
What was that?
Item C, the consideration to approve the training between Dreyer athletic physical.
So do we know what the issue is that the contract, that the insurance company is reviewing?
No, Dreyer requires a certain language, and so they're just going back and forth and rewriting the contract to make sure that that language is covered before they volunteer their services.
Did the contract come from them initially? Was it their contract? It was their contract initially, right?
Yeah, but our insurance company has to have certain kind of
Or
language.
our
in it.
insurance
Yes,
company,
ma'am.
not
Policy.
Dreyer's insurance.
Yes,
company.
yes.
And so that's why C was eliminated. So, Board, with the noted changes in the items listed on the consent agenda, do I have a motion for approval?
So we
So-
had the motion and
Okay.
the second.
Okay,
We're
so all,
discussing.
all discussion that's been had under the items, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we go to open forum. We don't have anyone signed up except for Mr. Shivers, which we're glad to have here this morning. So, Mr. Shivers, if you would like to come present your findings and presentation of our audit result for the school year ending June 30th, 2016.
Good
Good morning.
The audit went very well. I think it's very important that I mentioned this to you, that this chapter is to be commended. I cannot do my job as your auditor without their assistance. I know that me and the 3 and 4 others that I bring in with me are interfering with their work. When I go in and ask a question, typically somebody is right behind me with another question. To establish that you're courteous, you're professional, that you stop, that you pull the records that we need, that you answer our questions. It was almost as if they wanted us to finish up and get out of here.
Probably.
But it's, they are good. An audit is not a bad thing. I'm not a bad guy. I have a professional job before. You hired me as a professional. And that's what I do. Like, I'm doing it for 9 years. I tell people, some of them are scared me a little. But I have a great group of people. So it's a tremendous amount of experience. And we understand what we're doing. There's a few primary objectives for the audit. Very quickly. There are a few primary objectives with an audit. One is that I'm going to issue an opinion on your financial statements. And ideally, we want that opinion to say, these financial statements are free of material misstatements. We call that an unqualified opinion. Or if you want to think of it in these terms, it's a clean opinion on your financial statements. Your financial statements are good numbers. Okay? The other objective I have is because we get a tremendous amount of federal funding, the federal government says, I've got to audit a certain number of those programs. They tell me a process that I got to go through. You want to finish that process, that will be the federal programs that will be subject to audit. For the year ended June 30, 2016, that was child nutrition and that was special education, your IDEA Part B and preschool. The objective there, again, is to issue an opinion that says those programs are free of material non-compliance. Okay? And again, the opinion on those two programs is, again, what we would call an unqualified opinion, or if you want to think of it in terms of a clean opinion, that's what you got. We didn't find any areas in those programs where there was material non-compliance. Now, as part of an audit, one of the things that we do is we gain a very in-depth understanding of what we call the accounting controls of a school district, both as they relate to the financial statements and also as they relate to these federal programs. And we make an analysis of, or an assessment, if you will, of those controls to first answer the question, are they suitably designed to achieve management's objectives? And again, your objectives are very common or similar to mine. Financial statements are free of material misstatement. financial programs free of material noncompliance. So we make that assessment. And then we have to do some limited testing on that to make sure, well, you're just doing what you say you're doing, that sort of thing. In going through that process, both on the financial statements and on the federal programs, we did encounter a couple of matters that did end up in the audit report. I think if you don't have a copy of the report, certainly one is available to you. Looks like everybody's got one. On page 69, we'll just briefly talk about these. We had this one deficiency in the accounting controls. And what happened, there were 3 school buses that were purchased that should have been capitalized. In other words, they should have been included in your fixed asset accounting system, and they didn't get there. It seems that there was some, the bus purchase occurred during the transition of some staff. We had somebody that departed, and then there was a little gap, and someone else was employed, it seemed, and this transaction seems to have occurred sometime within that time frame, and an error and a mistake just happened. But nonetheless, once it was brought to the attention of staff, it was corrected. The buses are now included in your fixed asset accounting system. On page 70, we had a couple of deficiencies as they relate to the federal programs. One was the child nutrition program. The Office of Child Nutrition with the Mississippi Department of Education has a program that's referred to as a statewide school food procurement program. Practically every district in the state operates off that system. In other words, what happens at the state, they do all the bidding for the food and food supplies, so you don't have to, and you just merely ride their contract. And you've got options of things that you can select from. You got your frozen, your non-frozen, you got milk, you got bread, things like that. You also have produce on there. Now, if a district elects not to participate in one of those items, then it becomes incumbent upon the district to follow the federal guidelines as it relates to procurement. The district elected not to go with produce. Now, that could be for a number of reasons, and I'm not doing any detailed analysis on this. I do know that in some of the regions around the state that child nutrition is set up, some of these produce vendors don't bid on that. So then it just falls back upon the district to follow those guidelines. That could have been the case here. But what we found was there were no quotes in acquiring produce. All right? There's a couple of produce vendors within 40 to 60 miles of here in a couple of different directions that are available to acquire those quotes. So we did run into that. We talked with the program director at great length about it and provided options on what to do, how to do it, things of that nature. So I think obviously as we go into this next year, all of that will be in play, and that should go away. It's also worth mentioning very briefly too that we've had a change at the federal level as it relates to procurement rules and regulations for our federal dollars. It comes out of the Office of Management and Budget, and it's simply referred to as uniform guidance. And it goes into a lot of depth and detail about what is now required of us as it relates to procurement with your federal dollars. As we go about auditing school districts, we spend a considerable amount of time with the staff, with the business manager, with the federal program department directors, and going over that in great depth and detail to inform them of what these new rules and regs are. Somewhat unfortunate, but it seems that the Department of Education somewhat dropped the ball on adequately informing school districts of what these changes are. So we've taken it upon ourselves to go through that process and take on that role. The other item that we have deals with special ed. At the end of the year, special ed is to complete an annual expenditure report by September the 30th and submit that to the Department of Education. The totals on that report must agree back to the accounting records. What we found when we did the simple comparison of that report back to the accounting records, there were some significant differences. Let me say there were some differences. I don't want to suggest that it was considerably off, but they were off enough. The differences were such that we felt like we had to report the matter. Now, let me tell you one of the problems we run into here. The Department of Education has a form, obviously, annual expenditure report, and they have several line items on that sheet of paper that the school district has to drop in some numbers. There is no direct correlation between our accounting system here and the numbers we have on that system and what the Department of Education wants on their sheet of paper. So sometimes it's easy to, in trying to add a couple of things together to find the right number that education wants, we can possibly make mistakes. It seems from my last discussion with the department head on that, she was aware of that and was led me to believe that she was working with the Department of Education to send in a revised report for them. Obviously, that's a Department of Education matter there, and if that's something they desire, obviously, I would pursue that. Other than that, it was a good, clean audit. We tested the state auditor gives me a 41-page document that I'm to test for certain compliance with state laws and regulations. Make sure all of you are bonded, for example, and bonded correctly. The state purchase laws. Make sure you're requesting your ad valorem in accordance with law. Looking to see that the rehiring of any retirees is done correctly in accordance with PERS rules and regulations and so forth, and a number of other things as well. We didn't find any areas there that would suggest non-compliance. So overall, it was a really good audit. I mean, everybody likes good, clean audits and so forth. These were just some errors that happened. It's unfortunate. We're human, and we sometimes make errors. But I think they're all easily corrected, and you should see these pass as we go forward. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer those. If you ever want to get in touch with me, my name and phone number is on file here along with my email address. Quite simply, I'll help you any way I can. Do anything I can.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shivers. And on behalf of the board, I think I can say that we would greatly appreciate your time and effort in bringing your staff and working as diligently as you have to get us to where we're at now with this report being completed and before us. Board, do you have any questions or ideas, concerns you want to go over, Ms. Burdell?
Thank you, Mr. Shivers, for the report and for coming in and combing through the books and the numbers, because it really is a settling kind of thing for our community to understand that you know, this staff is in this board, that we're really following all of the rules and regulations, with the exception of these few findings. So thank you very much for that.
Right.
But I do have you were going to make a statement?
Yeah, I was just one brief thing.
Sure.
Because we did perform this audit so late in the cycle. What we're doing is working with Ms. Holmes, and she's working with the financial advisor to make certain that we get everything in place so we can be back in here September, October, something like that, and then get a current audit.
Got it.
Okay?
Got
We do
it.
have that on the table.
Thank you.
Mr. Shivers, I have a
Yeah.
question for Dr. Hickman. For these three findings, do we need a policy, or do you feel that we are able to put a procedure in place as a corrective action to make sure that we don't have these instances to occur again?
No, the policies are in place. All of them were human errors. Like you said, the produce was just an update that we didn't know about. And as far as ordering through the produce, the special ed part of it was two different forms that they put a different set of numbers on one form. And so that was just a coordination problem between the SPED and the business office. Then on the school bus issue, we already have that handled, and then obviously we're ordering our school bus to the state contract.
Right, that was going to be my question. If we're ordering new buses, we want to make sure that we capture them
Yes, ma'am.
properly. So thank you for that.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And just, one clarification, and I think something you and I discussed, is that on the procurement of commodities, is that, in the state of Mississippi, if you have a purchase of $5,000 to $50,000, you have to have two bids. And I think the procurement, the way the federal guidelines are, from what you explained, is that $5,000 floor actually drops to $3,500. And so, of course, as you were just discussing in your talk, is that they didn't do a great job communicating that to business offices and school districts. And so that was really why that finding happened, is that there might have been that, along with, as you outlined in your report, the other aspect of it. But just know that those numbers sometimes change, and they don't always line up as A to A, B to B. So now, board, is there any other questions for? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Shivers. We greatly appreciate it. Now, board, we will move to item number 7, which is the Office of Business Management. We have our item A, consideration to approve the financial statements. One is our monthly financial statement reports, fund balance and cash balance and budget status report, A, B, and C under one. Then our monthly combined and combining financial report statement, our statement report, monthly revenue budget report, monthly expenditure budget report, and certification and summary of reconciled bank statements. Board, I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
It has been motioned by Ms. Purdell.
Second.
It's been seconded by Dr. Shoemake. Any discussion about the reports? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we move to item number 6, which is our monthly ad valorem tax collection analysis. Board, we've had an opportunity to review it. Is there any discussions on this report? Money's still coming in, correct? Okay. That's what it
I
looked
do
like.
have a question for
Yes.
the upcoming budget. Have we had communications with Mr. Andrews? Do we know anything about what the numbers are looking like going forward?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Spears,
Yes.
Dr. Hickman, members of the Board of Trustees, I have been in contact with Mr. Andrews, and he is now prepared to start working on finalizing the numbers for us to sort of know what those dollars will equate to as far as millage and what the new property value may add to our request. But those numbers he's still working on, and I do expect them shortly.
And the
Thank you.
good thing about it is that when you kind of drive down 45 or you go other places, and even if you go down Military and you see Sunflower, how they've upgraded their facility, that's new value that will come on to, the rolls here. So it's always good to see a new Waffle House in town, and a new hotel being rehabbed over there where the Holiday Inn once stood in its footprint. So I don't think that will be captured on the La Quinta that's coming in. It'll be next year, but certainly a lot of the projects that are finished up, and I believe you'll give us a detailed analysis of what we've added since we looked at our request. Okay. All right.
And I do
Yes.
want to make one observation about the ad valorem tax collections. I have received the latest numbers from Mr. Andrews for May's collections, and it was $240,000+. So we are in excess now of our request. So any other monies we receive, which will be from June's collections, will be additional revenues that were in excess of the collections or requests that we made on this year's tax request to the city. So we do expect and have seen an excess in collections there. Not necessarily escrow,
Right.
but we have seen it in excess.
And just to clarify, as you go through and you finalize the base and how you shore it up, then we'll be able to see if we exceeded that 4% number that's allowed, or if we're actually just going to have surplus collections. Yes. All right. Now we go to item 7, which is the athletic events report. Board, is there any questions about it? Now we move to item number 8, which is consideration to accept the Apple Inc. one-to-one computers bid 653 that we advertised for, and now all the information is back, and I believe this is a continuation of a program we have currently going for our incoming freshmen. So, Board, is there any questions about it for Dr. Hickman? I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Has been motioned by Ms. Friedel. I'll make the second. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we go to item B, which is the claims docket. Board, I need a motion to pay the bills.
So moved.
That's been motioned by Ms. Friedel. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Mr. Sparks. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we move to item number 8, which is the Office of Superintendent, Dr. Hickman. Right now we have, Board, all the information when we have travel is uploaded to your resources for review. If you had a chance to review those items. And I think, Dr. Hickman, under B, you have one trip that you would like to share with us some details.
Yes, the trip went to Cupertino, California, to visit the Apple's headquarters. Was invited with a few high school teachers. Very interesting trip. They really talked about, they wanted to be kind of in partnership with us with some of the things that we're doing in our district that's in the forefront and right along the alley of what they expect districts to do in order to kind of reform education. And so also they wanted to look at how we can become an Apple Distinguished District since we have already changed our curriculum instructional model in using devices in an appropriate way. It was very neat to see the culture of Apple. It saw and talked the second in charge of Apple, so it was real neat. Wanted to talk to Cook, but we couldn't. But it was a very neat environment. We actually got to sit down with the guy who invented junk mail, and we thanked him. A junk mail filter, and we thanked him. He looks like kind of like a wizard. Actually, he said that the two characters on my wife would tell you Lord of the Rings or whatever, that people say that they got the characters from him because his hobby is magic as well. And then he also invented, which is not well publicized, but it's Alex, which is a voice. If you have an Apple device and when it reads to you, it actually reads to you like a human. You can hear, if you actually put Alex as your voice, listen to it because you can hear the breaths between the breaks, and it actually processes better to allow you to edit your documents and hear read back, as opposed to the robotic voice of before that just continues to read. And it can differentiate between words like desert and dessert. It will actually ahead of time look at the word, process the sentence, and give the correct word. So I mean, this guy's a genius. But anyway, as far as our school district and our teachers kind of participated in a way to really lead the high school into a transformational movement. So I'm excited to see some of the things that we're going to do differently and try to get the teachers up to speed with the professional development and better utilize technology to really grow our students at the high school level. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Hickman. Board, regarding Dr. Hickman's travel or his details and everything, is there any questions or comments? And Dr. Hickman, I appreciate you looking into that and seeing how we might be able to, move our district forward in that respect, technology adaptation. So, thank you. Now, Board, we go to item 2, an item we discussed at our meeting, which is the district-wide C-Spire voice over IP phone system. And just to clarify with Ms. Tippett, I believe that was that we're not going to have to pay for any of the hardware installation. It's only the monthly service that we'll be saving about $1,400 a month once it's up and moving. Yes.
We have someone from C-Spire if you would like. I know he has a funeral to go to right after it's in
yes.
Not Tupelo, but anyway.
Yeah. If you'd come to the mic, please. Thank you. If you would just state your name.
Stephen Turner with C-Spire
Thank you.
Anything, just any questions y'all have, I might answer.
Well, one, I think we looked through everything, and it was pretty straightforward, but thank you for bringing this to our attention. Is there anything that we should know that wasn't?
No, sir.
Okay.
I think we've had enough meetings, I think, so I think we're pretty good, other than I just wanted to, yeah, we look forward to partnering with y'all.
All right,
And I
they
think
said-
the board,
No, I was going to say, but I think they promised they'd have it done by the 4th of July, right?
Hey, I've got somebody's name I'll give you, you can take that up.
Okay.
I think just some of the summaries
Yeah.
the board was asking was, one, that we're saving money,
Yes.
considerable money. Two, is that we're not paying for the devices up front or
No,
paying for them.
there's nothing up front. I mean, literally, we're gonna bring in the equipment. It's an all-inclusive service.
Yes, Ms.
Question,
Burdett.
good morning. Thank
How
you
are
for
you?
coming. I'm good, thank you. I know we're saving money because we're switching from one provider to C-Spire, and that we currently have our cell phone services with you as well.
You do.
So I think I'd asked a question in our last meeting about any discount, because we are now utilizing you for 2 services as opposed
Like
to
bundled
1.
servicing.
Yes.
With your wireless, everything's handled separately. You'll get a bill from C-Spire, but wireless, because of E-rate regulations, state government regulations, that type of stuff, y'all are already buying off the state contract, which is the guaranteed lowest rate for wireless through the state. There just isn't any lower. I mean, we can go back in and we've done a very good job of looking at it as far as it goes, and do like a rate plan analysis on the plans to make sure maybe where you've got somebody that has unlimited service, they don't necessarily need unlimited service on. We've already requested that. I think I requested that on Friday, just to make sure that we had y'all the savings. But the state plan, we won the state wireless contract back in June again, and it pretty much, they keep us on a tight schedule as far as making sure everybody keeps the lowest rates that you can have. We have to guarantee that.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think that's, just one thing. I mean, we could just audit through and see, make sure that we don't have any phones that aren't being utilized, that might have been issued at some point. That might also be something to consider. And as far as, I'm not saying the 4th of July, but certainly as we roll toward the next school year, your anticipation of working with Dr. Hickman and his staff is to try to minimize any type of disruptions we might experience as we roll into the next school year. Is that correct?
Yeah, and schools take precedence, schools and government take precedence over any void that gets put in, just because of the children aspect. We don't,
Right.
we don't want to be interrupting classes and stuff like that, which
Sure.
it will be top priority once everything gets signed.
All right, excellent. All right, Board, do you have any more questions or comments?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Ms. Fisher.
Could you just explain very briefly what the difference is going to be in the quality of our telecommunications and other services that you're changing to, because we're switching to the VoIP, or Voice over Internet Protocol?
Of course, you've got your cost savings on, that's huge, but from the standpoint of the voice over IP system, it's, for lack of a better word, I'm kind of a car guy. So I'm gonna say you're kind of swapping from a Pinto to a Corvette, for lack of a better word. It's a completely different circumstance. You've got an old phone system that, weather comes through, storm, anything can knock it off,
Can
because
take us
truth be
down.
told, it's running on your light lines that are outside. So weather conditions that, truck, I could leave here and get run off the road, run into the light pole and knock your phone system out. This system everything's board, it's run through fiber, it's ran over internet. So with the reliability that y'all have got, and being schools, the fiber systems at the schools are a lot more reliable than the internet that we get at home, for instance, because you've got best effort at home. Here it's a dedicated internet circuit, so you're not sharing it with anybody down the street. The phone system runs, it kind of piggybacks over your internet, for lack of a better word. And it lets you customize it. It can be as customizable as you want. It's going to make people where, from a security standpoint, I can get up with the superintendent if I need to. Even if he wants to step out, he can press a button and be available. Voicemail to email is a very, very good, another good part of it, just from a brief overview, because it allows you to, I could call in, leave you a message, and it can be saved in your email. That way you can look back at it instead of saying, okay, well, Stephen took this message for me and he told me that Dr. Hickman said tell you this, and it could have been something completely off base other than what I wanted to tell you.
And in terms of manageability, from an
Yes,
administrative
ma'am.
standpoint?
It is as hands-on as you want. Now, we host the system, so we're managing it for you. But it's also, you know, if you need to change names, if you need to look at different things, it's something that Ms. Beth will have access to that she can look at and make changes. It really makes it easy from a school standpoint when you start trying to move offices and move locations and have teachers that are moving here, you know, even across the hall. I'm sorry, if I want to pick up my office and move now, you're going to have to call, tell us, hey, come move our phone system, change this. Now it's hey, I'm going to unplug my phone along with everything else, put it in the box with my goodies. When I leave my office, I'm going to move it across the hall and plug it in. And it's business as usual. You've still got your extensions and everything else.
One last question.
Sure, go ahead.
Will this increase the quality of our internet service as well?
No, ma'am, this isn't going to do anything with your internet. This is truly just your phone system.
So, but the VoIP is dependent on our internet?
Yes, ma'am.
Which I believe we received through the state of Mississippi. Is that correct? I think that they provide all of our bandwidth and everything that we need to run our operations. So, and I mean, that's just where we're getting it versus from the provider of C Spire, is that they're already I don't want to call it streaming, but giving it to us as it is.
So you're saying then that the state's provisions are sufficient for this new system?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Well, Ms. Tippett, did you have a comment? Okay.
Right now, we have a 500 meg circuit, but the plan is to upgrade it to a gig next year. And the state is providing that without us paying for it.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank y'all.
And board, now we have this item 2, which is consideration to approve district-wide C Spire voice over IP system. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Has been moved by Mr. Sparks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Has been seconded by Dr. Shoemake. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we move to consideration to approve the purchase of 10 school buses through the master lease program in the amount not to exceed $900,000. And just for clarification purposes, I think we talked about this, but I'll highlight it. 9 of the buses will be just the regular fleet buses that we have been looking to put in, and I believe Echo Ride will also be providing just 5 regular fleet buses. But we also, of the 10, are including a special needs or handicap accessible type bus that will be part of our 10 that we purchased. So 9 regular, 1 to accommodate students with disabilities. And Dr. Hickman, do you have a comment about it?
I do it, or I can wait till discussion, but you guys had tasked me to find out about the white roofs. That's an extra $800. And that is a state requirement. If you have air conditioning on buses, you have to have the white paint on the roof to reduce the stress on the air conditioning.
Okay. All right. Yes, Ms. Fisher.
Sorry. I just also want to make sure that the public knows that with that special bus for accessibility purposes, that the seating is going to be much less. 65, I think, for the regular buses, 47 for the special needs bus. Well, actually 36 after installation. And that even though the price for that bus is in the neighborhood of the price for the other buses, is because everything has to be retrofitted or fitted for that, even though they're 2018, I think, Cummins. Yeah, 2018.
Thank you for highlighting that, and certainly, you know, it helps, you know, because I know we have over the, you know, past few years picked up a couple, 3 buses here and there, and some have been for disabled students, so this will just add that much more availability in our fleet for those students to accommodate them. And so, board, I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
And it's been moved by Ms. Friedel. I'll make the second. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we go to item B, superintendent recommendations. Consideration to approve revised CMSD administration organizational chart. Board, I need a motion for approval.
So So moved.
Has been moved by Mr. Sparks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Has been seconded by Dr. Shoemake. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor of approval, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we move to item number 2, which is consideration to approve 2017-18 non-certified personnel recommendations. Board, I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Has been motioned by Dr. Shoemake. I'll make the second. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we move to item 3, which is consideration to approve revised salary schedule number 34. I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Has been motioned by Ms. Friedel. Do I have a second? I'll make
Second.
this. Mr. Sparks made the second. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we go to item number 4, which is consideration to approve 2017-18 supplements for additional duties. Board, I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Has been motioned by Ms. Friedel. Do I have a second?
Second.
Has been seconded by Dr. Shoemake. Any discussion? And the only question I have is, we've gone through knowing the budget year and kind of in any way possible made any adjustments?
Yes, even with the 45 stipends, we reduced that to, I think, 38, is it, Mr. Shannon? So we're still trying to trim and,
Sure.
As much as possible.
Thank you for that. All right, Board, we have our motion and a second. All in favor, please signify with your right hand for approval. It is unanimous. Now we go to item 5, which is consideration to approve staff personnel items. Board, we did spotlight a couple of the changes that were made as far as a termination becoming a resignation and, of course, one additional hire. Those were the changes made. And I need a motion for approval. Do I have
So
a motion
moved.
for approval? It has been motioned by Mr. Sparks. I'll make the second. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we go to item number 6, which is consideration to request release from employment contract. Dr. Hickman, would you like to shed some light on this?
I would. She's asking to be released for a contract, and if in the letter it said that she wanted to move from the middle school, and there were no vacancies available from when she asked, but now there is, and we have been trying to contact her since Friday. But there's a self-contained special education position open at the high school, and this is a long-standing teacher that we had within our district. So with that in mind, my recommendation is not to release her from the contract, and we're definitely trying to get in contact with her again to let her know that we do have a position available at the high school that she's recommending.
So would it be an item we could just table to our next meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, Board, with that in line, and Mr. Dunn, if you'd help me with this being listed the way it is, would we need to amend the agenda, or can we just flat out table it?
No, sir. You can at any time motion into table something.
Okay. All right, just clarifying that. All right, so Board, what is the pleasure of the Board with respect to item number B6?
I move that we not approve the release. You mentioned tabling, but in the employee's letter, there were some date parameters that would be adversely affected for her if we leave this in limbo. So I would, based on the superintendent's recommendation, of motion that we not approve the
Okay.
release.
All right. And so in doing that, that has been the motion. Do I have a second? I'll make the second. Any discussion? And this is consideration not to release the employment contract. So that is the motion. And it has been motioned by Ms. Fisher, seconded by me, Mr. Spears. And any more discussion? All in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. And just you captain that, okay. All right, now we go to the goals update. We have the Columbus Middle School at Risk report, and I know Ms. Smith is at a conference at this particular moment, but I think Dr. Hickman wanted to go over and highlight some of the different areas of her report.
And just a quick summary for those who wasn't here Wednesday. This is a report that she had to do, started at the beginning of the year with myself, Ms. Verdale, and Ms. Smith went down to the state, and we had certain requirements that we had to fulfill in order to put in place to ensure that our middle school moves from one grade rating to another to make sure we're doing things that's successful for kids. In the middle of the part of it, the state's responsibility is that they come in and they ensure that we're doing things according to a plan that we have developed that they approve. And towards the end of the year, it got to a point where the state person said that there's no, they don't see anything else that we can do, that we're on the ball as far as providing appropriate interventions for students, trying to work on the culture of our building, ensuring that appropriate teaching is in place, and ensuring that the structure is in place at our middle school. And so that's kudos to Ms. Smith and her staff. One of the things that Ms. Smith said that she's really wants to tackle, and I think any middle school principal has this issue, is really changing the culture of the building for the better. And I know Ms. Verdale pointed that out also in some of the surveys that we had. And that's a work in progress because you still have kids who are part of another culture, and you start to have that incoming sixth grade that benefited from kind of trying to establish rules and regulations and change the culture. But you still have middle school kids who 1 minute they're adults and the next minute they want to be kids, and so that's a constant battle. But I definitely do see there are areas that we need to improve as far as altercations and learning how to solve problems from a social emotional standpoint, and definitely understanding the culture of our male students who are a little bit more hands-on, and we need to teach them to kind of respond in an appropriate way to conflict.
Thank you, Dr. Hickman. And I know a lot of the talk that we have heard, not only in this last report, but throughout, is really trying to shift the paradigm of thinking and, of course, how people interact with one another there at the middle school, not only from the student level, but the student-teacher relationship and the teacher-to-teacher relationship and teacher-administrator relationship. So it's good to see that and working hard at it. Board, do you have any questions or any comments regarding the report? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hickman, for that, spotlighting that. Now we'll go to item number 2, which is workers' compensation report on the number of accidents in the schools. Board, this is just a report. Is there any questions or comments regarding this report?
I have one question.
Yes, Ms. Fisher.
I think on this report it mentioned, well, there were 2 incidents at one location. What are the corrective measures that are being taken to address the problem? Because they were both in the parking lot, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was at Success Academy, I think.
Mr. Shannon, if you can please comment on that.
Yes, sir, Mr. President, Dr. Hickman, members of the board, Mrs. Fisher. Those 2 incidents did happen in our parking lot at Hunt, or the Columbus Success Academy. We have surveyed the area there, and those were purely just accidents. There's nothing that we can really recover or correct with potholes or cracks in the pavement. Some people, they just fell down as they were going to their car, basically. But if there are areas that we can't correct, when these things do happen, we definitely do go in and fill in those things that we can correct. But there were no errors on our part, so to speak, at all.
And Ms. Fisher, may I speak?
Yes,
Please? I know one of the things that I'm still working with the mayor to see if they have excess blacktop, those kind of things that they have used to fill the potholes in the city. If at any given time, we have specific areas that they can dump it in and pack it down for us. That's one of the things that we talked about, that he's going to survey around with me. We're going to drive around to different locations and see about the police cars, to see about, you know, line service or how we can, not to eliminate our line service, but if there is an area of improvement that the city and our school district can work together with, we'll see if we can do that. And the same thing of my suggestion would be, how could we improve our parking lots, you know, little by little, without us having to incur that $600,000, $300,000 price.
Thank you.
Mr. Spears?
Yes.
I just want to be clear for the record that there is a concern of potholes in our parking lots. They will not fix themselves, and people will continue to fall and hurt themselves, which would put our district in a very negative liability position. And I'm concerned not only about the school and the finances this it could possibly cost us, but also to the safety of the children and the teachers and the parents and employees who walk on those parking lots.
Thank you. And certainly, if as you kind of have some of these different talks, or going around and analyzing the different things, if you would be able to report back to the board if there are some progress made with that respect in filling those, or even if it's just if it's something we can't address at this particular moment, making sure they're clearly marked so that someone doesn't, late in the evening or something, stumble across one. Yes, Mr. Shannon?
And I definitely want to piggyback and just quantify what Mrs. Fisher has said. These two instances did not involve any of those errors, but we do have several issues throughout our district that we've been trying to patch and use the white gravel to fill in holes that just aren't as quality as going
Like
ahead
coal
and fixing
mix
it.
or something
Yes.
like that.
So
Right.
she is correct, and I appreciate her bringing that to our attention.
The
To
high
the board's
school.
attention, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the high school, and in both of the large parking lots there.
And our sports facility too. And so we do hear you. Uh-huh, yeah. Oh, okay, I'm
Definitely
sorry.
the large parking
I thought you were talking about the other side of that. But no, we, just to make sure that, well, as a whole group, a team of 6, we do hear you with those concerns, and we're trying to figure out how we can address it with the tight budgets that we have now. So it's a priority, but it's we're trying to juggle. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Yes.
Just a quick question. This is just for my information. At the end of the school year, which we just had, do y'all sit down and analyze what kinds of analyze the worker compensation reports to see if there are any patterns that you can spot that you might be able to anticipate for the coming year?
Yes, but Mr. Shannon, you want to say something?
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Shoemake, we do. We look at that each year, and we also look at the numbers per site and the numbers year versus year. As you can see with your analysis that you may have, the numbers have gone up slightly this year, and we were very proud last year that they went down some, but a lot of the accidents, as we continue to, we usually do it at the end of June after the fiscal year is ended, but we'll analyze and make sure we know how many reportable offenses we had or accidents versus non-reported, and to see what the cause of those are, and then we decide on what training needs to take place for our employees to prevent those from happening again. So we're thinking along the same lines.
And a part of the accountability is we try to put it in front of you guys also, so that to make sure that accountability is there. But as he said, at the end of June, we do kind of talk about what next steps and what training is necessary for our staff.
Yeah, I noticed one thing that bothered me is the number of teachers who are injured breaking up fights. And I think that loops back to, changing the culture in schools, because a lot of those were at the middle school. So kudos on trying to figure out how to anticipate that and then see what can be put in place to not necessarily ensure, but make it easier for teachers to avoid getting injured in fights. maybe how teachers need more training on how to handle those. Thank you.
The other thing that I would like to suggest is to make sure that we have a partnership in this as a board. And like I said, the last board meeting we were at on Wednesday, is that if you guys have connections in the community from construction companies, you know, those kind of things that either you want me to talk to or that you guys can talk to and they can donate. I mean, I'm sure it's a tax. It could be tax deductible, maybe not. But if they can, at any given time that we can plug up a pothole here and there, that means a lot and it adds up because you guys know our budget constraints. You guys know what we have to deal with in educating children as well. And so I asked for that partnership from you guys as board members, as this your guys' school district as well, that we be a team of six on this issue.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Board, is there any more questions or comments on this report? And thank you both for your information. Board, now we go to item number 9, which is the Office of Instruction and Assessment. We have our school climate survey results for the elementary schools as well as the secondary school results. I know we talked some about these different reports at our meeting on Wednesday, but are there any other questions or comments anyone has regarding the results?
I think the only comment that I would have is to just, since this is our public
Right.
meeting and it is being recorded, that the public not think that we have just glossed over this information, that we have talked about it in our Wednesday meeting, that Dr. Hickman has the action to come back with this board with a game plan for how we're going to address those issues about school climate, and not just student to student, but also teacher to student.
Right.
And so we look forward to seeing his recommendation.
Absolutely. And also the other part, you know, just to echo what we talked about on Wednesday, is to make certain that we're doing best efforts to, you know, I know that the amount of responses we had didn't necessarily reflect 100% capture of everybody, and I certainly understand that's just the way it works. Sometimes you don't always get everyone's voice heard, but that we're just kind of evaluating as to, you know, why we may be missing part of the population's results and try to in some way make sure that we're, you know, capturing them as well. If it's extending time or, you know, whatever it is. I mean, certainly that's for you and your staff, Dr. Hickman, to see, but that we get as close to 100% as possible. And thank you for doing this, and you're working with your staff to get those results back to us so that we can continue to see where, you know, we need to work as a board to provide resources, but also, you know, some of the things that people are feeling there in the classrooms and throughout the school system. So thank you. Now, board, we'll move to our next item under 9, which is B, consideration to approve request to advertise for professional development bid 654. Board, I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
It has been moved by Mr. Sparks. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Dr. Shoemake. Any discussion? Dr. Hickman, anything you want to add on? Okay. Being no discussion, all in favor of approval, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we move to item 10 on the agenda, which is closed determination for executive session. Board, I need a motion.
So moved.
Has been motioned by Ms. Friedel. All in favor of approval, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Everyone, thank you for being here. I'll be out shortly to announce the items will be taken up in executive session. Of the approval for the executive session minutes. The motion was made by Mr. Sparks, if I remember correctly, to go into closed determination, and it was unanimous. Then we went into executive session, and the motion for the one item for approval was made by Mr. Sparks and was seconded by Dr. Shoemake. And then we had our motion, which was to approve our executive session minutes, to where Mr. Sparks made the motion, I made the second, and it was unanimously approved for executive session minutes. And then returning to open session, which we're in now, the motion was made by Mr. Sparks, and then it was seconded by me, and now we're back to regular session. And that's the only item that we took up for consideration. Yes.
Perfect recitation, except Angela Verdell made the motion for closed
Yes,
determination.
excuse me. Ms. Verdell did make that motion. And it was approved unanimously to go into executive session, or closed determination, excuse me. All right. Board, now we have our last item on the agenda, which is for adjournment. I need a motion for adjournment.
Question
Yes.
or comment?
Yes.
Before we go into that, I just want to understand, there was an item that was on the original agenda that we discussed Wednesday, which was removed regarding the mural, and I think it's been removed to July, August.
I think that's correct, yes.
July, August. Do we know if there's any intent to involve the talents of Columbus Municipal School District in determining what kind of mural is going to be recommended
Dr.
to
Hickman?
be put on that wall?
I asked Mr. Shannon to talk to him, and I've seen the correspondence of emails, but
Okay.
I don't think we addressed that issue, and I'm not sure.
Yes, sir. Board President, Dr. Hickman, other members of the board, Ms. Fisher, we did reach out to Kevin Stafford, who's working in conjunction with, I think, the Columbus Arts Council to get that taken care of.
Just Main Street, Columbus.
Main Street,
Yes,
Columbus,
just make
that
sure.
is. There were some concerns on their part also from some other citizens about the mural, so they're starting from scratch, coming up with a different design, and they did want our input as if there's some things we want to include on that wall, we can send those to them, and they'll do their best to implement those if they can. They will bring back a design to us to approve before anything is done, and he hopes that will be July or August. So they will submit something to us before any work takes place for our approval.
If I may make one other suggestion, when you go to visit Joe Cook Elementary School, you see some wonderful artistic talents that have been displayed there. And it's a combination, I think, I'm speaking of a replication of was it no, not Van Gogh. Yes, yes, Starry, Starry Night, Van Gogh. And that was, I believe, with students, teachers, and parents. Excellent. So I would like for the artistic talents of not just Joe Cook, but students, parents, teachers that are in the district to be considered when the design of that mural is, before it's presented to us.
Well, and I think that's a good point. And the other thing I think was a question with the, I guess you say, topic, subject matters to have had lived, dined, you know, those particular items are not just specific to Columbus Main Street, but Mississippi Main Street. That's kind of like their motto and different things. And so I think that as they go back and they're talking about from the west wall, and then they were going to plant vegetation there, because I've been out there scraping paint chips off of that wall. I know how big it is. That certainly, you know, we may want to also incorporate, as you're talking about, with Franklin Academy, starting at that end and working its way back to center, to where you almost have this merger of the two different things that we're trying to tie together there, because you know, that is something that we should certainly continue to communicate to them as they go back and are doing that. But just know that I think as far as the language on it, from my understanding, is that is because I researched it just as we talked about, that is a motto that's embraced by all Main Streets across Mississippi, and maybe even like their bigger organization outside of just Mississippi. But, you know, I think that since we are on school property, that we could see how we might be able to have that work together as well. Yeah, absolutely. But also incorporate some of the more key characteristics, such as in their mural, that it does reflect, such as Franklin Academy and, you know, the education point, even though it may not necessarily be titled that unless we do our own. But certainly, as they're putting resources together, that, you know, that we consider that as part of that effort. So. Yes, Dr. Hickman.
And Mr. Shannon, do we know if there is a specific way that they want to receive our feedback?
Yes, Mr. Stafford asked if we could just email all of our questions, concerns, or suggestions to him. He'll make sure they get to the association. And I do believe they're working on a certain time frame, so I don't know how the student, parent, teacher aspect will work, but with your direction, of course, we'll put that in writing to them and get some feedback.
Well, and two things, if you would, I would say is that, we would email Dr. Hickman these questions that he could pass along to Mr. Shannon. And then if it is a timing thing that they're trying to do, then certainly, ask to see it orchestrated in phases so as our students come back that it can be fresh at the beginning of the year. Because I don't think it's something that, a project of that scale with the other work that they would have to do, it would be something that they would be able to knock out overnight or anything. So just see how we might be able to model this into a phased out type of thing that it comes together. But obviously those could be some concerns that you've heard from us that you could communicate, and then any other questions you have, email to Dr. Hickman, and you would be a conduit to pass those along as well. So.
And even if there is a time constraint, we still have Falcon Blast, we still have our website, so that
That's true.
information can be communicated
That's a
to
good.
families and employees.
That's a good point.
Just,
And yes, Dr. Schumann.
yeah, just one other question. Did we get a feeling that they would be open to the idea of somebody from CMSD being on the committee, since it is the wall?
That's a good.
And that might facilitate, instead of just doing it by email, actually having someone there.
We didn't get a feeling either way. That has not been brought up, but we can definitely ask that with the board's, Dr. Hickman's approval.
Yeah, if we can ask.
Yes, sir.
And just after you kind of get that details back, just communicate it to the board. Have Ms. Velma communicate to everyone on the board. So, okay. Well, thank you very much, board. Let's see. We need a motion, and yes, I need a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Has been motioned by Mr. Sparks. I'll make the second. Being no discussion. All in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. We are adjourned.